how the government is thinking about this? Okay, so I will begin just before I begin formally, sir, Abinash sir, can we just check your mic? Make sure, and then we will begin. If we can just check your mic. Yeah, Pawan, can you unmute? Can you please unmute Mr. Verma so we can check his mic and then we can begin the formal program?
Yes, I will.
Yeah.
Yes. Okay, great.
Good
So
afternoon,
then,
everyone. Good afternoon.
good afternoon, sir. Let's begin. Very warm welcome to everybody. I would like to start by thanking our guests for accepting our invitation. I also hope and pray that everybody is safe, your friends and family, and yourself. To enjoy this discussion, please mute yourself and turn off your videos. We will be taking questions. I request you to put the questions on chat, and maybe in the second half of the discussion, if somebody would like to ask a question, then we may unmute some of the participants. My name is Sachin Agarwal. I'm the CEO of Shrijee Group. Shrijee was established in 1976. So we have 44 years of experience in the sugar industry. We design, manufacture, and supply turnkey raw sugar mills, turnkey refined sugar plants, and ethanol plants. We are very well known for our sugar processing equipment, especially the continuous vacuum pan, falling film evaporators, direct contact heaters, sugar dryers, and several others. Today, Shrijee has clients in 28 countries, but as we say, phir bhi dil hai Hindustani. And who better than our speaker for the day, Mr. Abinash Verma, to talk to us about the Indian sugar industry. Mr. Abinash Verma is the Director General of the Indian Sugar Mills Association. He's a familiar face to all who are connected with our industry. Mr. Verma is our link to the government. He has been ably representing the Indian sugar industry to all stakeholders. He's a familiar face on many television news channels. He's frequently quoted in newspapers where he superbly articulates the many challenges that our industry faces. Not just in India, but as Director General of ISMA, he represents the Indian sugar industry internationally and also makes presentations in global conferences and seminars. He is a director on the board of the Indian Sugar Exim Corporation for the last 8 years. Mr. Abinash Verma is a veteran of the Indian sugar industry. He was previously a director of sugar in the government of India. He has a first-class master's degree in economics from JNU. And sir, I thank you so warmly for accepting our invitation and coming here. Very warm welcome to you, sir. Pawan, please unmute, sir. I think Pawan, sorry about that, sir.
Yes, sir. Yes, I have done that.
Okay. Very warm welcome to you, sir.
Thank you. Thank you very much for the very kind words that you've said on the introduction. It's a pleasure. I think we did this last year, and it's a pleasure to be back again with you, Sachin.
Thank you, sir.
I would request you to take it forward from here.
Sure. Sir, as your work is very well known to the sugar mills, but in today's webinar, there are a lot of people from the supplier base, from the supplier ecosystem. Why don't we just start by perhaps you can tell us a little bit about the work that ISMA does and how it affects all of us who are connected to the Indian sugar industry.
Yes, I think most of you would be knowing that Indian Sugar Mills Association, which stands for ISMA, represents the private and public sector sugar mills of India. Currently, we have about 225 sugar mills as our members across the country. And our main job is to represent the Indian sugar industry before the government as well as internationally, convey the interests, convey the requirements, convey the needs of the industry before the government, convey it properly across to the media, to all the stakeholders, communicate with the consumers, communicate with the exporters, the traders, people like you, the machinery manufacturers, And internationally also, we are part of a lot of groups across the world, also across the globe. And so in the recent past, India has become a very important player in the international market. We are able to export a lot of sugar internationally, and therefore internationally also people want to know what India is doing. So right from kind of estimating our sugarcane acreage to estimating the sugar production to how much quantities that we would like to export, uh, collection of data, statistics, and then putting across to our members. I mean, that is the main job. So it's more of advocacy before the government as well as representing the Indian sugar industry worldwide also.
Thank you, sir. Thank you. That captures very wonderfully what important work ISMA does. And sir, with my next question, I hope I don't jinx this, but can we now safely say that COVID has not impacted our industry, or am I jumping the gun here, sir?
Yes, I would say, I mean, the COVID has been a problem with all of us for the last 1.5 years, almost about 18, 19 months. We have been facing this problem. But despite, I think, most of the industries in India, most of the sectors in India and across the globe having been very badly and adversely impacted, I think we have not been so badly impacted. And the reason for that is that sugar, ethanol, sugarcane, all these are essential commodities defined by the government of India. And therefore, even during lockdown, even last year, when the lockdown was tougher, we were allowed to move our sugar, our sugarcane, and our plants were not shut down. Second important thing what happened was the shutdown or the lockdown that happened last year as well as this year, the hugely badly affecting second wave this year also happened almost at the fag end of our crushing period. So that also did not really impact our sugar cane offtake and the crushing and the sugar sales. This year, the sugar sales has been better than last year.
Okay.
Last year, for about, say, when the lockdown came in March, and from March end to, say, the beginning of June, there was an impact on our offtake of sugar as well as the movement of ethanol across the country, because a lot of the bulk consumers, a lot of the industrial houses, the sugar sweetened manufacturers were asked to shut down, or their shops were not allowed to be open for some period, and therefore there was a downfall in the sugar offtake for 2-3 months. But when the lockdown was over, then we saw the demand really coming back, if I may say so, with a vengeance. And therefore, the initially in June, July, August last year, we saw the sales really going up. This year, the lockdown has not been as tough as last year, even though the second wave was terrible. But because of people probably getting used to making the sweets at home or the sharbats at home or the cold drinks at home, this year the offtake continued to be good. And if you compare our sugar sales this year with last year, till about end of June, I would say we have sold about 8 to 9 lakh tons, or almost 10 lakh tons, a million tons more than what we did last year.
Oh,
And therefore, this year, if we are looking at a consumption of about 26 million tons, that was the estimate when we started the year, 26 million, we might be kind of crossing that 26 million tons also.
that's great news, sir. And as you said, we have already consumed compared to last year 1 million tons more. And I think all of us in the Indian industry should say a thank you to all the home chefs, sir, who have continued to bake and make sharbats. Sir, any thoughts on the MSP announcement? By when are we expecting this, or you know?
I would say I was expecting it yesterday and about a year back. So we've been waiting with, with all expectations and all prayers that the government should take a decision on increasing the MSP of sugar. Now, most of you would remember that the government had increased the MSP of sugar way back in February 2019 almost about 18 months back. And since then, there has not been any increase, despite the fact that the FRP has also been increased and there has been an inflation across most of the raw materials that we use, or even steel or the machinery that we buy from you. So despite all that, there has not been any decision on the increase in MSP. And I would also say that all the top sugar producing states, the state governments represented before the government, that the MSP should be increased to anywhere between 34 to 36. Niti Aayog had recommended the increase last year from 31 to 33 in the report in April 2020. Then you had the Committee of Secretaries also recommending the increase from 31 to 33. The group of ministers under the Honorable Home Minister, Mr. Amit Shah, also recommended in July to increase, last year, July, to increase it to 33 rupees. After that, the FRP also was increased by 10 rupees per quintal. So all of these together should have, and I assume the government should have increased the MSP by at least 2 to 3 rupees. Our request has been to increase it to 34.50 per kilo,
Okay.
34.50 per quintal at the mill gate. But due to reasons, I can't really say what are the reasons why the government has still not decided that increase. But I would say that since there are elections next year, and the most important and the politically important state of Uttar Pradesh is going to elections next year, I would believe that the government should be taking that decision very soon. How soon, when, no, anybody's guess. I can't really put a number there or a date there.
Okay, thank you for sharing that, sir. So we all hope that the 3450 number that you've mentioned is announced and is announced quickly so that the industry has some certainty. Sir, as ISMA, you have access to a lot of satellite imagery, a lot of data. What is your outlook on the acreage, sir, for the coming season?
Yes, as you correctly said, ISMA, for the last 10 years, we take the advantage of the satellite images that we get from NRSA, and we do it thrice a year. The first one for the season we do sometime in June end or July beginning. We procure the images depending on the cloud and all at that time. And on that basis, we do our preliminary estimate. So as per the preliminary estimate of the sugarcane acreage, because you should remember some of the crop is still very small, and to capture it through the satellite is not easy in the end of June. Plus there are some cloud in some parts of the country. So therefore we call it a preliminary estimate. As per the preliminary estimate, next year's sugar acreage, especially in Maharashtra, seems to be slightly higher than last season, or the current season, which is going to get over in September. If you talk about the all India level, all India sugarcane acreage in the current season was estimated to be around 5.25 million hectares. And next year's satellite images suggest that the acreage will be about 5.45 million hectares. So it's an increase as compared to the current year. And therefore, we expect the sugarcane availability to be much more.
And sir, by when do we know these numbers for certain? Because like you said, it's cloudy. So by when do we get a good sort of confidence on these?
Yeah, I mean, certainty in estimations are not really the call of the day. It's not easy to do that because in sugarcane, not only do you need to ascertain the sugarcane acreage, but you need to also determine what is going to be the yield per hectare,
Right, sir.
which if it varies by a ton per hectare or couple of tons per hectare, it makes a difference of a million ton of sugar production. Then you need to also estimate the sugar recovery, the sucrose content. You also need to make an estimation of how much of the sugar cane is going to be used by the sugar industry, how much of that is now going to go into sugar, and how much of that will go into ethanol. So there are 4 or 5 very important variables. So it's not very easy.
Sure.
But we will do our second estimation sometime in end of September or beginning of October,
Okay.
when by time which time most of the rainfall would be over, and we will have a fair idea of what actually happened with the monsoon, especially in the state of Maharashtra and northern Karnataka, or the southern part of the country, which keep on changing from year to year. because a good rainfall will give us that extra yield or better recovery. A bad rainfall or a lower rainfall does impact it downwards. So I would say our first advanced estimates, we call it the first advanced estimates because we are much better prepared with more statistics sometime in the end of September or the beginning of October.
Thank you. That is very interesting, sir. As suppliers, as part of the ecosystem, we are so focused on our own technology. We don't realize how much hard work and sophisticated technology is going at your end to make accurate estimates of some of these numbers. And based on what you just said, it seems that Maharashtra acreage looks like it will increase. Um, Sir, if we come to the global situation, as you mentioned in your introduction as well, India is deeply connected to the global sugar supply and demand. What is your outlook on that, sir? Do you see how is the global supply and demand looking?
See, the two most important countries globally, who number one and number two exporters in the world, Brazil and Thailand.
Right.
These two countries really make a difference to the international market by their production and exports. Now, if we talk about Brazil, which is the largest exporter and the largest sugar producer in the world, Brazil in the current season has not done as well as people were expecting. And they are, I would say, about 5 to 6 million tons short as compared to what was being expected earlier because of dry season and lower availability of sugar cane. Now, people also say, and experts also believe that because there has been a dry season now, the sugarcane crop for the next year will get affected in Brazil. And therefore, there might be a concern on the availability of sugarcane next year, whether it's going to be lower by a substantial number, but people say that it's going to be lower than this year at least, that people are confirming. I mean, one cannot really confirm that unless we see the rainfall which happens later in the season, because there might be a small recovery there. But Brazil doesn't seem to give you so much or as much as they traditionally are giving into the international market. So there seems to be a lower availability of sugar from Brazil next year also. How much will also depend on the crude oil prices and the ethanol prices, how much they're going to divert into ethanol. So that's later in the season. Now, as concerns Thailand, as you would all know, usually they produce, in the last few years, they have been producing anywhere around 14 and a half million tons per year. But in the last two seasons, including the current one, which is still on, they have produced anywhere around 7.5 to 8.5 million tons only, almost about 6 million tons lower than what they usually do. And that is why if you put the two countries together, Brazil and Thailand, in the last year and this year, their production is much lower than what the international market has seen. And therefore, you are seeing that net effect on the sugar prices, which have rallied from around 11, 12 cents about 12, 13 months back to almost about 17 and a half, 18 cents now. Uh, Next year, Thailand is expecting to make a recovery, but they don't expect to make a recovery from 7.5, 8 million tons back to 14 million tons. They're expecting a recovery to about 10.5 million tons. So they will still be about 4 million tons less than what they usually do. The most important thing with Thailand and India is that Thailand exports to most of the Asian countries, and the largest export is to Indonesia. Being part of ASEAN, they also have an advantage over the import duty. That import duty advantage has now been extended to India also.
Oh, that's
And
great.
therefore, India can export into Indonesia at the same lower import duty or concessional import duty like Thailand and Australia. Now, Australia is not a big exporter of sugar into Indonesia, but if Thailand is not such a big exporter into Indonesia, that gives a lot of space to India. And therefore, last year and this year, we have done very well as far as exports to Indonesia is concerned. But to just summarize, next year also, we believe that sugar production estimates for the next season should be on the lower side as compared to what we generally expect.
Okay, that's great. And there, that certainly opens up the room for exports for Indian producers. Is that right?
Exactly, exactly. In fact, I'm the experts and my friends internationally or in the trade houses tell me that the world is now wanting 5 million tons, around 5 million tons of sugar from India.
Okay. So, and sir, I mean, which brings us to the government's sugar export policy decision. Uh, Again, sorry to keep putting you on the spot like that, sir, but any thoughts on by when that announcement is going to come and what kind of support can we expect?
Yes, I mean, one thing is very clear now with the government of India that it has been established that WTO rules allow India to give developing countries like India to give an direct export subsidy, and that has been tested 2 years back. They give us something like 10.5 rupees per kilo of sugar export or 10,500 per ton of export subsidy. In the current season, we started with 6,000 rupees per ton of export subsidy, which was later on reduced to about 4,000 rupees per ton of export subsidy because the global prices had improved. Now, this 4,000, when it was reduced to 4,000, the global prices then were around 17 cents. So
Okay,
that is one thing that we should remember, that if the sugar prices, global prices are above 17 cents, there will be a question on that 4,000 rupees per ton, whether it's going to be brought down. Also, that gap is calculated on the basis of the domestic prices. The current domestic prices are on the lower side. Now, as we discussed, if the MSP is increased by a couple of rupees or 3 rupees, the gap between the global price and domestic prices will increase. And therefore, uh, you might say that the global prices are going up and therefore the subsidy will come down. But since the domestic prices might go up, the subsidy might go up. So to put a number on the subsidy is extremely difficult. If anybody is doing it in the market, I would say it's pure speculation. I would say that the numbers would get determined when the government is finally considering the proposal at the cabinet level.
okay,
There is a very big process in the government of India to decide the export subsidy or the export program. There is a discussion within the department, there's a discussion with the Ministry of Finance, then they go to the cabinet. So it is going to take a little more time, whether it's going to take a month, 1.5 months, or 15 days. I mean, I can't really answer that question. But we have submitted before the government that there is enough sugar already in our stocks, as well as the fact that we will be producing more sugar next year. And therefore, overall, we should look at an export program. And as I mentioned, the world is wanting Indian sugar to the extent of 5 million tons. And we would like to export again whatever we did in the current year, whether it's going to be 6 million tons by the government, 5 million tons. I don't know. I can't really say how much the government decides. It's all a decision at that level. But we from ISMA have submitted that a decision should be taken before the start of the season, because
right.
then we can plan our raw sugar production, sign our contracts, plan it, and then start producing from the beginning of the season.
Right, sir. And I have read a number of interviews where you have repeatedly emphasized this point. The timing of the decision is also important, not just the size of the subsidy, but the timing as well.
Yes, and because we have explained to the government also that between October and January, India has a very, very good chance of exporting good quantities of sugar. Number one, because the Thai sugar comes into the market sometime in January, and the Brazilian sugar comes into the market sometime in April. So, number one, we have a very good window between October to January, and then again, a smaller window, you should say, between January and April. So this is the best time to really announce as quickly as possible. Let's see how soon it happens.
Right, sir. Thank you for that. Just a note to the participants. We will take some questions from the participants. Request you to please put them in chat. Kindly, please ask your questions as clearly as possible on chat so that I can read them. And for a few participants, we may unmute you and give you an opportunity to ask questions directly as well. But we'll do that in roughly maybe 10 or 15 minutes. Sir, now with ethanol blending looking increasingly successful, can we now say that sugar is no longer a cyclical industry, or is it too early to celebrate that?
Yeah, I mean, I will give you that answer in two parts. Number one, as far as cyclicality is concerned, uh, why did we used to have that cyclicality? It was mainly because the sugar cane availability used to vary from year to year. And why did it vary from year to year? The main reason was because we were unable to pay to the farmers on time, and because of that they suffered and they shifted out of sugar cane into some other competing crop. And when there was a lower production, the prices were good, we used to pay better, and they used to come back. So that cyclicality before 2010, every 5 years you could see 3 years, 3 good years and 2 bad years or something like that. But what has happened after 2010, I would say, that the sugar cane price fixed by the government in terms of that FRP, the FRP started from 2009-10, which included a profit element for the farmers. So from 2009-10, if you look at the graph at which that FRP has been increased, there have been two specific periods in between where the increase has been very steep by the government of India. Now, if you compare that sugar cane price increase with the other crops, other competing crops like say paddy, wheat or soya or cotton, you will see that the prices of other crops have not increased. If it is the price of sugar cane has been at that angle, the other prices have been at a lower angle and the increase has not been as much. CACP itself accepts that the return to a sugarcane farmer currently is almost about 60 to 70% more than what they can get from any other crop. So what has happened after 2019 is that even if the farmer gets two-thirds of his payment on time, which usually happens, two-thirds of his payment on time and the rest one-third he gets after 6 months, 8 months, he is still willing to grow this crop because he has got whatever he would have got from another crop. And the rest he is assured that aaj nahi to kal mil hi jayega. Second, what is important is not only the remuneration is good for sugarcane, but sugarcane, there is an assured buyer. Whatever they produce, surplus, whatever, it has to be bought by us. The assured price that they have been promised by the government, they get that. There is absolutely no problem. Whereas in other crops, there is no other crop in the country where the farmers get whatever has been promised or the MSP that has been fixed by the government of India. So there is certainly a gap there. It is a sturdier crop. Slight weather changes, lower rainfall, temperature changes does not affect sugarcane as much as it does a lot of other crops like soya or cotton, etc. So what has happened after 2019, even if there has been a sugarcane price area of the farmers have not left sugarcane. And if you look at the sugarcane acreage from 2009-10 onwards, you will see that it is hovering around 5.1, 5.2 million hectares every year. It could drop to 5 million, could go up to 5.4 million, except in a drought year. Obviously, because a drought year, people do leave sugarcane. So therefore, the cyclicality has gone away. Number one, because the sugarcane price is so good for the farmers and they get a very, very high return as compared to any other crop, and therefore they're not willing to leave sugarcane. So one reason is that. Second reason that you're probably looking at is whether ethanol is going to ensure that sugar production is not going to be too much in surplus.
Right.
Right? So the answer to that is yes, we are developing our capacity in a big way. There is a heavy investment which is going on in the ethanol sector because now we have started believing that we are able to successfully transfer that extra sugar cane or that B heavy molasses away from sugar into ethanol production. The government has assured that whatever you produce, we will take it. The government has, the Honorable Prime Minister on the 5th of June, World Environment Day, has laid out a roadmap. The Niti Aayog has come out with a beautiful paper which lays out a roadmap till 2025 and 2030 and says that whatever these guys are going to produce, the oil companies will buy. They have talked about E20 vehicles being rolled out from April 2023. There are three dispensers of the Indian Oil and the Bharat Petroleum and Hindustan Petroleum in Pune, which have started selling E100 ethanol. So you are now people have started talking about flex fuel vehicles. You heard the Honorable Minister for roadways, Mr. Nitin Gadkari talking about flex fuel vehicles. So what we are now seeing, and the government has said we will double the requirement by 2025. So that gives us a lot of confidence that whatever we are able to produce, the government will be able to take that much quantity of ethanol, and therefore there is heavy investment. If you talk about the diversion of sugar into ethanol by this process of diverting B-heavy molasses or sugarcane juice, last season, I mean, that is 1920 season, we diverted almost about 800,000 tons of sugar into ethanol. In the current season, which is still going on till 30th of November, we expect to divert almost about 2.1 million tons of sugar. So from 800,000 tons, we have gone up to 2.1. Next season, which is going to start, that is 21-22 season, we estimate that we should be able to divert anywhere around 3.5 million tons of sugar. So generally, if you know that we have surplus of about 6 million tons or 7 million tons of sugar production over the domestic requirement. So if probably in the next couple of years, we have developed capacities and we are able to divert almost all of that surplus into ethanol, then you will see a situation where our demand supply position for sugar should kind of balance each other, give or take a million tons here and there.
That's certainly very good news, and I think so far, everything sort of seems to be coming together nicely, and we are heading in the right direction. And this industry, which is such an important crop for the people of India, for the economy of India. Sir, what is your outlook for the percentage of blending that can be achieved in the next 1 or 2 years?
See, in the current year, which is going on and which is up to 30th of November, I've just seen the position till 2nd of August 2021. So at an all India average, we have blended 8.04% for the whole season starting from 1st December till now.
Okay.
And the quantities which are being promised to be supplied is almost 1 crore liter of ethanol, which is expected to be supplied every day from here on till 30th of November. If we are able to do that without much problem, then we expect to, in the current season, I expect to reach about 8.4 or 8.5% blending. This
Okay.
is substantially higher to the best ever achieved last year and last to last year of about 5.2% ethanol blending across the country. Also, that we have now reached almost all the states except, and on Kashmir also we have reached the northeastern states, but not in a big way. So if you leave Jammu and Kashmir and northeastern states, we have reached all the mainland states, and we are trying to now, almost all the states except for Bengal, Jharkhand, Odisha, Rajasthan, and I think Kerala and Tamil Nadu. These 6 states, we are still not at 9 to 10%. We are at about 7%, 6%. But the way we are increasing our supplies or the way we are increasing our capacities, next year, we should be reaching all the states, including Northeastern and Kashmir, and doing 10% across the country. So next year, if you ask me, the target that has been given to us by the government of India to reach that 10% all India average, we should be there, which will require about 450, 475 crore liters, about 4.7 billion liters or so. We should be in a position to produce that and supply to the government of India. There might also be a situation that in some of the states, the government might start looking at 12% blending or 15% blending also. BIS standards for that have also been rolled out. So there is a belief that we may be able to cross 10% next year.
Okay, that's great news. And so, what are some of the challenges that you see going forward to increase this blending percent? For example, in drawing room discussions these days, electric vehicles are mentioned a lot, right? So, that's just one example, but perhaps there are some others as well. So, what are some of the challenges that you see?
Let me first talk about the internal challenges within the sector.
Okay.
First challenge that we would like, we are already facing is the offtake of the ethanol that we are producing. So that offtake of ethanol, supposing we have signed a contract and we are wanting to supply to depot X of the oil company, we are at times facing a problem of decantation. Our tankers are waiting there for 15 days or so because the infrastructure of those depots are not ready. What is happening? We are going to new depots probably every 6 months or every 4 months, and suddenly realizing that even though contracts have been signed, that oil company's depot is still not ready with all the required infrastructure. So when we're talking about 10%, obviously we want these infrastructure to be ready in all the depots across the country, including in the northeastern states and the state of Jammu and Kashmir. Now, when we talk about 12%, 15%, and the Honorable Prime Minister has fixed a target of 20% by 2025, the demand or the requirement of ethanol by then will be about 10 billion liters of ethanol, about 1,000 crore liters across the country. So number one, if we are going to produce most of the ethanol in 4 or 5 or 6 states in the country and have to move that ethanol across the country, the transportation will be a very, very big issue. Second is the oil companies need to gear up, need to improve their infrastructure or the tankage capacities in all these depots, because scaling up the capacity from 10% to 20% is not going to be overnight. It has to be developed over the next 2-3 years. Third will be the dispensing at the retail pumps. The oil companies have to now start building up the infrastructure from moving from E10 to E20, dispensing at the petrol pumps. Probably for a few years, you will also see 2 dispensers, some giving E10 to the E10 compliant vehicles, some E20. Fourth challenge will be from the automobile side. They need to start producing the E20 vehicles from April 2023. The costing will have to be looked at. The subsidies will have to be looked at for these automobiles. Now, coming to the challenge that one expects or imagines will be coming from the EVs, the electric vehicles. Yes, the way the government is encouraging, and we see the state governments also kind of encouraging the electric vehicles with all kinds of subsidies to make it cost effective. That will be a challenge to a lot of the automobile sector, to the current system, the current injection fuel systems of the automobile. But whether EVs are going to challenge ethanol per se, I still am not very sure. I don't believe that the challenge of EVs will be to ethanol, because ethanol itself is a green fuel which comes from the farmers, and therefore there are multiple benefits of ethanol. If you compare the benefits of ethanol vis-a-vis EVs, EVs may give you one single advantage, and that is pollution. Going to control pollution. But when you talk about ethanol, it has 4 or 5 advantages recognized by the government of India. It does not only control pollution and improve the air quality, it benefits your domestic industry, it benefits your farmers, it reduces your net oil import bill. Now look at the EVs. If you look at EVs, EVs require what is called are the metals, the raw material. Nickel, cobalt, lithium. These are the 3 main components for making the batteries for EVs. Now, none of these are in any good quantity available in India, which means when you're talking about lithium-ion batteries for your electric vehicles, you will need to import these metals, or you will need to import the batteries when you're actually scaling it up. So scaling will be a challenge. Then when you're going to generate electricity to charge these batteries, you are going to have a pollution wherever you're going to generate. So there are issues, but we can live together. I mean, you already have seen hybrid vehicles where it runs on petrol and electricity, the battery. So petrol plus battery hybrid vehicles are there. Why can't we have ethanol plus battery vehicles in the country as hybrid? So both of them will be environment friendly. Now, when I say the challenge, if any, supposing the EVs will become successful, and I wish it does become successful, but if EVs become successful, it is going to challenge fossil fuel. So the challenge that will come from EVs will be on diesel, will be
Right.
on petrol, and last will be on ethanol. I believe that ethanol will have its own segment and have its own clientele, because ethanol has massive advantages, as I told you, and therefore it cannot be thrown out of the window. So EVs success scaling up might take a few more years, might take 10 years, 15 years, 20 years. I can't really put a date to that. But if it is going to challenge, it's going to challenge diesel and petrol more, and probably ethanol negligible.
And sir, with say if low oil prices were to return, do you feel the government has indicated sufficient consistency on the prices that, or should we be worried if low oil prices came back?
Yes, I mean, the government has made it very clear that the ethanol prices that they're going to fix or are fixing today is in no way linked to the crude oil prices. It is not linked to your petrol price at all. It is
Okay.
linked to your raw material prices.
Okay.
And therefore, you are seeing 4 or 5 different ethanol procurement prices fixed by the government of India. One linked to the sugarcane price, another linked to your sugar price, another linked to your molasses price, something linked to your maize or your paddy price or something like that. So it is not linked to your crude oil prices. The crude oil prices come down, I don't think it's going to make a difference to your ethanol prices. But having said that, we don't expect, I personally don't think that the government of India will continue fixing the procurement price of ethanol for years together. There
Okay.
has to be a last date somewhere where the
Right.
government of India will leave this sector and say, now you are big enough, you are now grown and young enough or adult enough to take care of yourself. Please don't look for our support. So that day will come today, tomorrow, 10 years, 15 years, 20 years. I can't really say when, but if you really look at the Brazilian story or the US story or any other stories across the world, any renewable fuel or renewable energy does have a support, is handheld by the government in the initial years. But when you grow up, then probably the government will leave you alone. So then you will see that, like the Brazilian model, our ethanol prices will keep on moving along with the crude oil prices but that is still some years away.
Okay. So, sir, before I open it up to the participants for some questions, is there anything else which you think is relevant and I didn't ask you about, which you would like to mention to the, everybody's here, the suppliers here, the mills are here. Did I leave anything out which you think is important for everybody to know?
I think all of us are playing our roles very well. I mean, in fact, when we started on this ethanol capacity building across the country, there were questions being raised by everyone, including the government, including probably the government raises questions even today. Do you have enough machinery manufacturers in the country who can supply your boilers or distilleries or your turbo generators on time? How much time will they take? But we have seen that the machinery manufacturers have come up, responded very well. And I have not at least heard anybody kind of complaining or saying that my project is getting delayed because my machinery manufacturer is unable to supply my XYZ on time. So we have seen that the machinery manufacturers have also kind of responded well, and I mean the number of manufacturers have grown. So it is not no longer that we are relying on 2 or 3 large manufacturers. There are 7 or 8 or 10 of you very reputed big players, and you have responded very well. So that is a very positive sign. I don't think any of us has had to rely on import, and therefore the capacities are coming up very fast, and we are able to help in producing that ethanol across the country quickly.
Thank you. Thank you for those kind words, sir. So I request the participants, when you ask your questions, please keep in mind that, sir, Mr. Abinash Verma has deep expertise in public policy issues. So I request you to kindly keep your questions focused on public policy related matters and not on technology. And if you, for somebody who would like to ask their question themselves, please raise your hand and then we will figure out a way of unmuting you so you can ask your question directly to the Director General. So please raise your hand. In the meantime, I'm just going to see the chat window and try and find. So, sir, Mr. Tripathi, please request you to raise your Zoom hand. I meant Zoom hand. There is a, please raise your hand on Zoom, which will make it easier for me. And let me just see the first question over here, sir. Just a second. So please requesting the participants to raise your hands on Zoom so that we can see. And so some of the questions they're repetitive. They've already been asked by me. So I'm going to, there is a question, sir, related to the floods and their impact on the crop in Maharashtra. Is it too early or do you have some thoughts on that?
Yeah, I would say it is slightly early. We have not done our homework on that.
Okay.
So we would like to wait for a little more time and then get a feedback and then.
Okay, so that question was asked by Dr. Avasthi. So as sir is saying, it's a little bit early, Dr. Avasthi, let's wait. I request the Shrijee team to please unmute Mr. Shailendra Mani Tripathi. Is it possible, Pawan? Can we, he has raised his Zoom hand.
Yes, sir. Yes, I can do.
Okay. Yes, please go ahead, Mr. Tripathi. Please.
Yeah, am I audible?
Yes, sir. Please go ahead.
Good afternoon, sir, Team CG and Verma sir, for your such a useful deliberations. My question is regarding supply of ethanol. As you know, UP is always surplus and it will be exporting ethanol to other states. So there are certain issues with regard to transportation cost. Though there has been some improvement in the subsidy or what you were saying in terms of to offset the extra costs incurred by the sugar mills, but it needs to be further considered to an extent where millers and both are in a better situation.
No doubt about it, Mr. Tripathi. And I don't know, you're from the sugar mill or you're?
Sir, yes, I'm from sugar factory.
So you should be knowing that I have been very vocal about increasing the transport rates for the last couple of years. And
Yes, sir.
I think the government is very unhappy with me for having always raised that the transport rates need to be increased.
Yes, it has been increased by your kind. Your kind intervention, it has been increased, but still, when we have to supply to,
it's still not good enough. It is still not good enough.
Yeah.
And number one, you would be knowing that we have been raising this point, and thanks to our submissions before the government, one policy decision has been taken recently. I don't know whether you're aware of that. That instead of fixing the transport rate only at the beginning of the year and then having one transport rate for 12 months, the oil companies and the Ministry of Petroleum have agreed that they will revise the transport rates every quarter, depending on the diesel rates.
That's good. That's good, sir.
So every 3 months, you will see a new rate coming up. The latest has been with effect from, instead of 1st July, they have done it from 15th July. So the next one you can expect from 1st October, a revision, and then every 3 months thereafter.
Right.
However, we understand and we have communicated to the government that the current rates are also not good enough and we are still losing a rupee or two.
That was my point, sir.
We will continue to impress upon the government, but sometimes it's not easy getting whatever you wish for, no?
Correct, sir.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Tripathi, for this question.
Thank you.
Pawan, is it possible to unmute Mr. Gautam? There is a hand raised. Yes, Mr. Gautam.
Yes, sir.
Can you introduce yourself, Mr. Gautam, when you ask a question?
Yes, sir. Good afternoon, sir. Myself, Gautam Kapoor. I was working with Mamana Sugar. I am a sugar technologist, and presently I am looking after the business of enzymes sector for sugar industry, providing customer solution to sugar industry. Sir, what we have seen from last 1 and 2 years, that because of the government ethanol policy, sugar industry is getting some benefit in terms of revenue generation. People are diverting their process to be heavy through be heavy route. And this season, when I meeting the clients, mostly all major groups such as Dalmia, DSL, Dhampur, Birla, or Balrampur, everybody is thinking of partially diverting syrup and be heavy route. We are going for this syrup and be heavy route because we want to generate more ethanol production. We want to do more ethanol production to meet out E10 or E20 planning of government. And side by side, it will also help us to reduce our opening sugar stock every year in the month of before start of the season. We are having near about 8 to 10 million metric ton sugar opening stock, which is affecting our sugar rates, I think, in the market because of the heavy stock.
Could you ask the question? I think that is all known to us.
Yeah. Sir, I want to know, sir, what will the impact of this year diverting through syrup and be heavy route on the sugar availability stock next season on in the opening stock of sugar? It will improve our sugar prices because of the less sugar production, or it will remain as such?
Thank you, Mr. Gautam.
Yes, Mr. Gautam, it's like this, that in the, as I mentioned, I think during the discussion that I was having earlier with Sachin, is that in the current year, we are expecting to divert about 2.1 million tons of sugar through this sugar syrup or the sugarcane juice or your B-heavy molasses. Next year, as I mentioned, our diversion is going to be or expected to be about 3.5 million tons of sugar. Now, if you ask me what is this doing to your sugar balance opening stocks, in the current year, we started the opening stocks on 1st October 2020 with about 10.7 million tons of sugar. Now, we produced about 31 million tons, but we are going to consume 26. So we would have added 5 million there had we not, and we expect to export about 7 million tons. So 31 minus, if you account for the excess production and then the opening stocks, we would have closed with 8.7. Now,
Yes.
had we not diverted that 2.1 million tons, we would still have been opening the year with about 10.7 or 10.8 million tons. Right? Number one. Number two, next year, if we start with 8.7 million tons, and had we not, and supposing we don't divert that into ethanol, that excess sugarcane juice into ethanol, we would have produced 34.5 million tons. And therefore, if we are going to divert about 33.5 million tons, we expect that we will produce almost similar in the next year at about 31 million tons. I mentioned in the beginning that the acreage under sugar cane is going up from about 5.25 million hectares to about 5.45 million hectares. And therefore, our net sugar production should have automatically been much more. But because we are going to divert higher quantity into ethanol, 3.5 million tons as compared to 2.5 million tons in the current year, next year's sugar production will remain at the same level as we have done this year. So that is the advantage, that is the magic, I would say, that we are getting out of ethanol diversion, into ethanol.
Okay, sir. Thank you very much. Thank you,
Thank
sir.
you. Just one request to all the participants. Please ask your questions directly. Request you to please come quickly to the questions. Sir, I'm going to take one question from the chat. Is it possible, or when do you think, if at all, it will happen that sugarcane price in India will be on pole percent basis, as it happens in some other countries? Instead of, sir, instead of the weight of the cane, but the content of the sugar in the cane.
Okay. See, it's not easy. Like, we can cite the example of, say, Brazil and say, look here, Brazil does a poll and tests every cart or every truck that enters their premises, at the gate, they pick up the sugar cane, test and give a test report. We get our sugar cane, say for an example, one average sugar mill will be having something like 30,000 farmers. And if each farmer supplies a sugar cane in bullock carts, you can imagine every day how many bullock carts enter your premises. And therefore, if you're going to test each and every bullock cart or a small cart or a small tractor, then you will take enormous time in only testing. And already, whenever I cross a sugar mill, I go to a sugar mill, I see long queues of bullock carts and tractors. If you go to Brazil, you don't see a queue at all. I mean, the truck comes and it's immediately tested and then unloaded. Here you have a long queue. So if you're going to test these each cart and then decide on the pole, it's going to create further queues and a lot of time. So therefore, we'll have to think of new technology, new system on how we can test. Do we test at the farm gate? Do we test at somewhere else on the way? Way bridge pe kar sakte hain ki nahi kar sakte hain? We'll have to start thinking like that. It's not easy doing it because our supplies come in very, very small quantities and from a lot of farmers.
Okay, again, I request some of the people who would like to ask questions, if possible, please raise your hand on Zoom. कृपया Zoom पे अगर आप अपना हाथ उठाएंगे तो हमें यहाँ दिखेगा जो प्रश्न पूछना चाहते हैं और फिर हम आपको अनम्यूट कर सकते हैं. Sir, one of the interesting questions that I'm seeing on chat is related to jaggery. Now, we are seeing that it's showing a lot of growth. We are also seeing very good prices at the retail level. What are your thoughts, if any, sir, on this, on the issue of jaggery production and increasing consumer preference for jaggery?
I don't really track jaggery per se, but to say that jaggery doesn't give you those calories is incorrect. Okay.
Right.
What jaggery does is it gives you the molasses also, because jaggery still has the molasses. It has not been removed like sugar. And therefore people say when you have jaggery, you get some nutrients also or some minerals that you get from there. Whereas pure sugar, which is refined sugar, does not have any nutrients. So that is the only difference. But if you're looking at having something and saying that, look here, I've had jaggery and therefore no calories, I think that's a misunderstanding.
Right. In fact, sir, I wanted to get a quick response from you on how is the industry responding to this somewhat negative publicity that we see about sugar. And would you like to sort of quickly respond? Because, sir, ये हम सबकी problem है. You know, we all need to unite together. और जो misinformation sugar के बारे में की जा रही है, तो your quick thoughts on that, sir.
See, we did a small campaign about 6 months back for about 5-6 months. Unfortunately, our timing of the campaign got caught during the lockdown. So we couldn't move around the country and we couldn't do physical meets or the meeting with the press and all to communicate. But what we have done is we have developed a portal. ISMA's portal is there where we give you the correct information. Okay. Anything which is correct, we put down there. We don't say that eating too much sugar is good for you.
Right.
I mean, eat your sugar responsibly. That is what we try and communicate. Secondly, what we are also trying to do from ISMA is counter all the wrong information or the myths which are being communicated through the media or published in newspapers or articles sent anywhere. We write to them. We request them, let us know why you're writing such a thing. And we have been successful in countering that because I don't think there is any evidence saying that consuming sugar itself leads to gain in weight or leads to diabetes or causes dental caries. No, there are other factors involved. So we have been able to counter that. Please do some research. Right. Thirdly, the government of India, the FSSAI, has been trying to bring out regulations. Like about a couple of years back, they started with the campaign. I don't know, some of you must have seen in the movie halls, Rajkumar Rao trying to tell us, Adha laddu khao, pura laddu mat khao. So we countered that. We countered with FSSAI that how and why are you doing it?
Right.
We went up to the top level and we tried to convince them that, look here, if you have some evidence to tell me that consuming sugar is bad or having one full laddu is bad, then please
Right.
tell us.
Right.
Then they were trying to bring in what is called as the traffic light signaling, wherein on the back of the label of on the sugar packs, sugar sweetened packs, they wanted to put a red mark. Currently, that red mark indicates non-veg, but they were saying we'll change the non-veg to brown, and then the red mark will be for sugar sweetened products which have more than such and such quantity of sugar, to kind of keep you or kind of alarm you that, look here, this particular sugar you should not have, or sugar sweetened product you should not have. So we argued, we fought with the FSSAI, and we have been successful on postponing that. So you don't see that red labeling on your sugar packs. So that is one success with that we got. Again, they have started another campaign, so we are trying to counter. Now, fourthly, that what we are trying to do is send out messages on your social network, on your social media, on your Facebook, on Twitter, on LinkedIn, on whatever social media is available. I would request all the sugar family members or people engaged or involved in sugar business to kind of send those messages or retweet or send it again on your Facebook or WhatsApp. We will be sending, and we are getting very active in that. I think another 15 or 20 days. There is already something on LinkedIn. We have about 2,500 followers on LinkedIn. We do post messages which are responsible and correct. We try and counter some messages which are wrong also. And now we are getting more aggressive on that. So then we will be requesting, and we will do more of these webinars. Sachin, if you can hold a webinar exclusively on that, we will try and communicate on which social media, what we are posting, so that if you can retweet, if you believe in them.
Of course.
Because we don't want ourselves to believe that if I'm going to reduce my sugar, I'll be the healthiest man on earth.
Right.
No, there are other reasons for my weight gain. I cannot give up sugar and have a packet of chips or my fries and say that I'm fine and healthy. No, we need to understand what is behind it. That is why that portal is there. And we will do some more media campaigns, especially through the social media.
Sir, it is our duty, in fact, कि जब भी आप कहें to spread this message, because ये जो this anti-sugar messaging has become so powerful that unless all of us, the mills, the suppliers, unless we all come together and amplify this message, we will definitely suffer as an industry.
Yeah.
I see a number of hands. I request Mr. Swapnil Pawar. Pawan, if we can unmute Mr. Swapnil and request you to please ask your question quickly, sir, because it's already 1 hour. We want to close in another 5, sir. We'll close in another 5-10 minutes, if okay with you.
Yes, sir, this side Chinmay actually. I'm just joining with my colleagues' PC. I'll just make it short and quick. Sir, right now ethanol blending in sugar mills is very much popular. So is there any procedure or processes government is going to adapt to keep the prices of ethanol lower for blending in fuels like in our whatever the petrol and diesels? So is there any processes or how government is approaching to keep the production cost of the ethanol is on the lower side, so that every consumer will get the benefit?
See, Swapnil, you are...
Chinmay,
sir. Sorry. Chinmay, you would know that my cost of production of ethanol will depend on the cost of the sugar cane that I bag. And if the FRP is going to go up continuously, then obviously my cost of sugar production is also high, and my cost of ethanol production will also be high. So number one, the government is aware of this fact, and therefore you are not seeing such high increases in sugarcane price as you used to see about 7 years or 8 years back. In the last 3 years, if you see about 3 years back, the government did not increase the price of sugarcane. Last year, they increased by 10 rupees per quintal. And now what we believe is, what we read from the media is they're going to increase it by 5 rupees per quintal, which is very, very, very fine, which is reasonable. So the cost of production will depend on the raw material. About 70-75% of my cost will depend on the raw material. Other things are processes. your efficiency of the machinery that you give me or the technology that you give me. So that will depend on that. But that will not make a massive difference. What is going to make a massive difference is the raw material price.
Thank
I
you, sir.
request
Thank you.
Pawan, can you please unmute? I think it's JKG phone. I'm sorry, I can't see the name, but please unmute JKG phone. Sir, please go ahead.
Sir, I'm J.K. Gupta.
Yes, good afternoon, Mr. JK Gupta.
Good-
Please go
good
ahead.
afternoon. And good afternoon, Mr. Verma. So my question is that you know that producing sugar through circulation route causes lot of pollution, and that handling the pollution is very difficult. Why not we start manufacturing only raw sugar for domestic purpose and refined sugar for all institutionalized sugar? Are you able to hear me properly, sir?
This is a pure business decision and technology availability. I am not the right person to answer this question about giving up the sulfitation process and adopting only the refinery process, because refinery process is going to cost you a little more in terms of your refineries setup of the capital expenditure on that. And the cost of refined sugar, I believe, is slightly more. Are the Indian consumers still willing to pay more for the sugar? Because if sugar prices currently go up by 1 rupee also, the bahut hangama ho jata hai. So I don't know whether they are prepared or the government is prepared to increase it. I'm
Sir,
not the
I've-
right person to
sorry,
query about
sorry,
it.
I have not been able to put forward my question rightly. My question is that world over, for domestic purpose, the only raw sugar is consumed. Refined sugar in very less countries is being consumed, and it is much more healthier to consume raw sugar in our tea and coffee rather than refined sugar in our tea and coffee. And also, refined sugar is not required to be only. See, refined sugar is made through the process of sulfurless sugar, and then it is refined. So in between, we produce only the sulfurless sugar, which is very good for health and which is very good for environment also.
Let me counter your. I'm not the expert in this, but my little knowledge tells me that whatever sulfur that we use to make sugar is permitted, allowed, and does not harm us in any way in our health. So that is number one. Number two, raw sugar still has lots of impurities. I'm not sure whether what you're talking about raw sugar is the same that I understand. The raw sugar that we sell into the international market, refine it and make refined sugar, that contains a lot of impurities, and I don't think we can consume those impurities.
Right. So, Mr. JK Gupta, thank you for your question. There is a lot of debate on this thing, and as Sir said, we sugar technologists work very hard, sir, in removing those impurities that you have mentioned. And strangely, today people think that the raw sugar is better, whereas we are working so hard to remove the impurities. So it's a funny thing, but maybe just last one or two more questions. Sorry, we are out of time, and sir, as you all know, sir is a very busy person. He has been
No. It's not like that.
Mr. Pawan, can you please unmute Mr. Arulappan? Mr. Arulappan, sir, please ask your question. And while there are a lot of questions on the MSP of sugar. Actually, maybe early on in our today's discussion, sir specifically addressed this question. But sir, इतने लोगों ने पूछा है कि if you don't mind, just again like a 1 minute on the MSP of sugar where we are at. If you can just answer that again quickly.
We are
Sachin,
trying our best to convince the government to increase the MSP, because in the last time when it was increased, it was February 2019. And since then, almost about 30 months have passed. And the government has increased the FRP at least once last year by 10 rupees per quintal. And they are also looking to increase it by another 5 rupees for the next season. Plus, there has been inflation, the cost of the machinery, the steel, etc., has also gone up. So we believe that the sugar prices, the MSP of sugar, which was fixed at 31 rupees in February 2019, should be increased to 34.50. we are requesting the government. We believe that most of the state governments have also requested. The Niti Aayog has requested. The Committee of Secretaries have also recommended for that increase last year. The group of ministers under the Honorable Home Minister, Mr. Amit Shah, also recommended for the increase in July 2020, that is last year, to 33 rupees of MSP, but it's still not happened. I mean, there are various reasons that people tell us, but it has not come from the governments. We don't know what the exact reason is, but we continue to request the government to increase the MSP, because that is the way forward. That is the only way we can actually pay to the farmers, because not only it gives us that extra revenue if we sell our sugar, but whatever sugar stocks that currently we have and whatever sugar that we are going to produce next year, we will get higher loan or working capital from the banks, because the valuation of the sugar goes up by that. So almost about 4,000, 5,000 crore extra working capital we can get and we can pay to the farmers. So various reasons, various positive reasons to increase the MSP. We want the government to increase. We continue to request them.
Thank you, sir. Thank you for repeating that, because there were so many questions on that being asked in the chat. Mr. Arulappan, please go ahead. Sorry you had to wait, sir. Sorry for keeping you waiting.
Verma ji, I do not know how you imagined my question. For that already you have made answer just now. Anyhow, I repeat my question. Say now the petrol and diesel prices gone up like anything. So we have to bear about 30% more for harvest and transport and harvest. The inputs like all iron materials, bearings, spare parts, everything has gone up 30 to 40% recently. Especially the sulfur price is now rolling at 17,000 to 20,000. That is the double the price. So the cost of production going to be increased around 200 to 250 rupees per quintal, unless what we aspiring for minimum 250 to 300 rupees per quintal is not raised and announced MSP price. Say, we sorry to say that most of the sugar mills may enter into debt trap or may lose heavily. Kindly on all bigger sugar mills, I request you, ISMA, to take up this issue seriously, since we got every reason. Because space, iron for 45 to 60 rupees, I need not to tell, shortage of time. Everywhere, the sulfur is rolling double the price.
Yes, Mr. Arulappan, I got your point, and I think this is what has been communicated by all the sugar mills in the various meetings. That which sugar mill do you represent?
NSL Sugar Hyderabad group of
NSL Sugar has also spoken to us, so they are members. So we are aware of this. These are the arguments that we take before the government also. So we are not on different pages. We are on the same page.
Thank you, sir. Thank you.
Sir, we are at 4:12. Do you want to take one last, or should we close?
No, you can take one last question.
Okay. Pawan, please unmute Mr. Vasanthan. Kindly unmute Mr. Vasanthan. And I apologize to the others who've raised their hands, but I'm really sorry. This is the last question. Please, sir's email. You can go to the ISMA website and please email sir. He'll be happy to answer your questions via email. But Pawan, can we unmute Mr. Vasanthan, who can ask the last question?
Yes, I'm trying to unmute him.
Okay. नहीं हो रहा है.
नहीं sir, नहीं हो पा रहा. Yes sir.
Hi.
Yes, go ahead, Mr. Vasanthan, please.
Yeah, good evening, sir. My question is about MSP, but it's on a different aspect. We have MSP for the white sugar, plantation white sugar. In future, there will be some MSP for even pharma grade and refined sugar as well, and the quota system for the sale of refined sugar or pharma grade will be imposed. Is it anything like that? And the other aspect is, what is the government's incentive plan for the sugar export in the upcoming season?
See, first of all, Mr. Vasanthan, there is a single price, single MSP for sugar. And MSP of sugar means the minimum sale price. Your pharma grade sugar or your refined sugar is above, generally sells at much more or a higher price than your plantation white sugar. So it's fine. No, we don't think we require another price to be fixed. You don't want multiple controls by the government on our sugar sales. So the minimum price of sugar is only for the plantation white sugar, and we don't want the government to fix another price for that. What was the second question?
what is the government's plan for the sugar export incentives?
Yes, I mean, see, every year the government does, whenever we request, does announce an export program just before the start of the new season, sometime in August end or the beginning of September. However, last year they gave us a big surprise by not announcing till 31st or the end of December. So last year's program was not announced in September or at that time when we requested. So I'm keeping my fingers crossed that the government should not delay it this time. I would like to believe that the government has kind of appreciated our problems, and we might hear something from the government soon. But I don't expect it to come very, very soon, because there are rumors that it might happen next week or 10 days or 15 days. There are numbers being talked about on the export subsidy. I don't think anything of that is true. It will take a little time, but I'm keeping my fingers crossed before the start of the season.
With that, we must end this wonderful seminar, sir. Thank you so much. Cannot thank you enough for your time. You always, whenever I request you, sir, aap hamesha aate hain. I'm very, very grateful that you come and you talk to all the stakeholders, sir. Thank you.
Thank you, Sachin, and it's been very, very interesting. And the question that you asked, I love those questions because that is what I do. So it's fine. Great.
Thank you, sir. Thank you.
Thanks a lot.
Thank you, everybody. And apologies if I was not able to ask your question, but thank you, everybody, for participating. Thank you very much.
All the best. Bye. Thanks.
Bye, sir. Thank you.